it's ineffective and unconscious action that we're taking. The reason why I look back at a lot of ancient cultures and ancient actual like spiritual methodologies that really they're not rooted in this airy-fairy fantasy world of spirituality. It's rooted in the actual principles of nature, things that we still feel today. So, such as in Buddhism, 3 fundamental keys to in their principle of life is, first you need right view, secondly you need right will, or right intention, and thirdly and lastly, that is when you go to right action. But if you miss those first 2 steps, it's the same as trying to put together a jungle gym and just skipping to the last step and putting things together, and then you realize that it's about to fall, completely crumble to the ground because you skipped every step all the way up into the take action part. So really, the first being right view. First thing you need to take any proper action in any way, shape, or form is to view the world properly. And that's one thing that I can say, even with myself, it's very difficult to view the world properly because it actually takes a little bit of subtlety. It's not just an intellectual thing. We don't just break it down and compartmentalize it and say, okay, these are the 4 kingdoms, the mineral, the plant, the animal, and the human kingdom, and then this is black, this is white, this is male, this is female, and we compartmentalize everything and break it down and put them into categories. Well, that's a purely intellectual way of doing it, and instead of taking a step back and trying to truly view the core, the root of the problems, such as, why did that ref call a bad call? Instead of actually taking a look at the actual core of the problem, the thing that I see the most is the fact that people want to take action immediately. They take an initial look at the world, and without understanding that they're applying a lot of their cultural values, they're applying a lot of their learned behavioral values, and a lot of their subconscious behavioral quirks. All of that value they are placing on what they see, and then from that point they have an opinion on the world. And from that opinion, then they immediately jump into, well, I want this, I want everything out here to help make me feel free on the inside, because that's initially what everybody truly wants. They just want to feel free, and they want some form of contentment or love or happiness. So they say, well, with this view of the world, this is what's wrong with the world, and at first glance, it's all of these things outside of me that I can see. It's the government, it's it's money, it's not having enough of this, it's having too much of this, it's living here, it's not being able to affect this person and not be able to manipulate this person to do what I want. Typically, people believe that other things, the external world, is, if you change the conditions of the external world, then it'll change the conditions of the internal world. But that's actually completely opposite. So we go along immediately jumping into the action of, well, what I'm going to do is I'm going to try and change the outside world, and I'm going to try and maybe put a petition out and have people sign it and get this person thrown out of office because it looks like this person is the one that's actually creating a lot of these ulterior motives and all of these backhand deals in government or in or in the economic field. And really, that all can be boiled down to its wrong view. You need to have a right view of how these things actually happen, and then you need, from that point, you need the intention of wanting, like your intentions and your will. You need to long for the evolution of all mankind, the support, the compassion, the love for all living things, and not just humanity. All living things, you want to support evolution of life in general. Without that, then you start breaking it back down and you compartmentalize it and you say, well, humans have more of a right than animals, that's why we see a lot of animal cruelty, and humans have more rights than the mineral kingdom, so that's why we see a lot of the destruction of and the uprooting of a lot of natural resources and thrown to different sides of the world that they're not naturally supposed to be in. And that's why we see the same thing with logging and destruction of the rainforest and everything, and the pollution. We just don't seem to really care, because all we can see is what immediately makes us feel better. And that's really, what we see in this world today is instant gratification. So it's a form of the reason why the world is the way it is today. If I can boil it down to make a very large blanket statement, it's all due to wrong view of how our world actually operates. Not just the physical world, not just taking a look at it and seeing it with your actual eyes, the actual experience of how the world affects you on a very subtle level. Like, how does it affect your emotional field? How does it affect your thoughts? How does it affect your will? What is it that actually creates your willpower? Why do you have the desire to feel these things? Why do you have the desire to feel or to be a part of this crowd or to look like this? Most people don't even understand why they have desire to do anything. It's because they don't truly sit and understand that prior spark. Nobody really understands what comes before thought, what comes before intention or desire. And that's actually what consciousness is. And true consciousness, unconditioned consciousness, I should say, is just a form of simple observation. And when you get to that, when you get to true unconditioned consciousness, that is right view. That's being able to see the world for what it truly is. But when we start applying our cultural values on everything, then it becomes conditioned consciousness, and that conditioning forces us to see the world in a different way. We see the world the way we want to see it. And then from there, we want to see the world this way, so our intention becomes skewed, because we don't see the world correctly, so there's no way for our intention to be on the right path after that point. And then after that, people jump straight into action. Well, I'm going to try and get this person thrown out of office, or maybe we can, follow what the Constitution says, and it's the duty and the right of the people to abolish this form of government and start over again. I actually get a lot of people emailing me specifically with that line of the Constitution saying, hey, let's do something like this. Let's start up a revolution. Let's start a movement to, with using this one line, saying that we can abolish this form of government if we reach a critical mass with support, and abolish just like the framework of our current existing government. And I always have to say, like, do you understand? When I reply, I don't say yay or nay. I try not to immediately jump into an opinion. I just say, can you tell me with absolute certainty that you know why you want to do this? Do you absolutely know why you want to abolish the government? You want to abolish this form of government and start up new. What kind of new government would you like to start up? And furthermore, what makes you think that you know the proper form of government to start up from that point? Because everybody, as of this point, there's 6.7, maybe 6.8 billion people on the planet, and there are 6.7 or 6.8 billion different opinions about the world. So that's why we see the world being stretched in 6.8 billion different ways, and that's why it's being depleted of all of its natural resources, and it's being destroyed from the inside out. That's why we see all of this, is because no one truly agrees, because nobody sees the world for what it actually is. So there's no right view, there's no more right intention in that respect. Even a lot of the organizations that are here with the intention to help, a lot of the times, without understanding what they're actually doing, they're causing or inciting a type of emotion, like some type of primal emotion within a large group, rallying people together with this idea that we're going to completely revolutionize the world, yet none of them truly understand why they want to revolutionize it. And I shouldn't say none of them, but the large majority don't understand why they want this revolution, nor do they understand what's going to happen afterwards, nor do they understand what drove them to even have the desire for change in the first place. So it becomes a very, very subtle, very crucial point to make, that before taking action, before standing up and trying to start a movement or start any type of action whatsoever, you need to truly understand what it is that makes you want to initiate that action and what you plan to get out of it, and then take an honest assessment. Am I actually going to feel free by doing something like this? Is tearing down the walls of government actually going to make me feel free, or is that freedom still not part of my subconscious, neural network, behavioral quirks? Is that where the freedom lies, or does it actually lie in the framework of government? Because we definitely see symptoms of slavery in the world today, in the physical world. But when you truly sit and spend some time, and I mean spend honest time, discovering what makes you feel free, not what you think might make you feel free in the future, but sit and actually feel, why do you feel enslaved? What is it about you that feels restricted or contracted from nature or from anything that you desire? What makes you feel enslaved and bound and fettered to something that you don't want when there's something else that you do want? What is that feeling? And exactly what do you truly believe, being very honest, what do you truly believe would make you experience true freedom? And that's why the Hanged Man project that I'm coming out with right now, I was very, very careful of making sure that if I ever, I'm coming out with a project, the next thing is going to be an actual audio book that I'm coming out with. And in there, every time I use the word either movement or revolution, I make sure I always follow it up with the word consciousness, because I'm not looking to revolutionize anything except for the consciousness, because I don't believe that there's any true revolution that doesn't have its roots deeply rooted within consciousness. And if there is a revolution or a supposed revolution or movement or some type of cause or a rebellion that is not rooted in consciousness, then in my personal belief, it's not going to work. Nothing's truly going to come out of it. It's just going to change the topical decorations of the existing slavery right now. And the prime example of that is, look at the past several thousand years. There have been countless revolutions, countless physical revolutions of empires growing to the top and then being torn down to the bottom, another one growing up in its wake and then being torn to the bottom, and then another one growing up in a different area and then being torn back down to the ground. What's happened ever since then? Has the world gotten any better within the past several thousand years after all of those revolutions? I don't see any evidence supporting that. I don't see any evidence saying that the world has gone into a better direction because of any of these revolutions. Because typically what happens is when there is a revolution, government is torn down to the ground. What typically happens as of that point is the people who try to start a new framework, starting from scratch, they're still rooted within the psychological, emotional, mental framework of the existing form of government, because government works on two forms. It works on the physical level and on the mental level, and then on a emotional level. So when you just destroy the physical level and you revolutionize, say you tear down an empire, then what happens is all of those people that were part of it, that destroyed it, and they want to start something else new, a lot of those, they still have greed. They still have lust. They still have pride, envy. They have all of these things. So with their greed that they haven't destroyed, because greed is a very, very subtle form of fear, and it's a subtle form of ego, if you haven't destroyed that and you're trying to start up a new form of government after a huge revolution, completely revolutionizing the form of government, what happens is if the people who are rebuilding have any greed within them, what are they going to do? They're going to look at history and they're going to say, well, this is how the Rothschild dynasty became super powerful. This is how the Rockefellers became super powerful. These are how these other people got into power and maintain their power. So what's going to happen is these people who are starting to rebuild it are going to learn from the past dynasty rulers, the past elite, and they're going to reform it in a way, even if they think they're doing it for the good of all mankind, they're still doing it in the exact same format that it was done before. And that's why in the Hanged Man project, I'm very, very careful to say the revolution because I'm all for revolution and I'm all for a rebellion, but it has to be the right rebellion. It has to be the right movement, the right revolution, and it has to start with consciousness, because nothing is going to change if you do not affect the core, the root of the problem, and annihilate it. Then once it's annihilated, then you can move forward, and then the physical can change, and then the physical will bring about the freedom that you truly wanted in the first place. But it's not going to happen, and it's definitely not going to last if it doesn't start on a conscious level. If it's just topical, then that's where your revolution is going to start, and that's where your revolution is going to end, on a topical level. You're still not going to be